All right. Hey, everybody, or at least as I probably should say, all three of you for now. We'll see what kind of a turnout we get out tonight for the Uber calendar tasting. Evan and I are already socially lubricated, having just done the regular calendar tasting. If you feel so inclined, feel free to turn your video feed on. We will not be broadcasting your image anywhere. It's just the two of us clowns that do that. We are expecting our colleague Marty to join us. We'll see if he shows up, and hopefully we'll have a handful of other folk. Oh, Jeff, are you not getting the calendar emails for the regular? Oh, Evan.
Really? Okay,
Well,
Jeff, I will in the background add you here so that you get the next one. I'm sorry for that.
I'm hoping that. Oh, did everybody who's got both get? You know what I mean? We
I
might
wonder
have.
if they shouldn't cancel each other out, but
No, but the people who have both, did they get the regular calendar email? Because they wouldn't necessarily be on the distribution list, because that's a separate database of people.
could
So
be.
to look into. And perhaps on my part, mea culpa, if that's what happened. But yes, there was a earlier session. We
Shoot.
did.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll maybe have to send out to the Uber customers and everybody that purchased both to just an invite for that next time.
Yeah. Do you want to give Marty God powers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this was a small session, a small intimate session last time. It's slightly larger, still intimate this time. Marty's joining us eventually. But in the interest of time, we probably should open window number one.
Number 6.
If you were on there last time, you know that I did, especially with the Uber calendar,
Good God.
and pick the selection. But I don't remember what we put in this thing, because Evan's doing all the blog posts, and I remember being proud of the lineup that we came up with to begin with. But then I kind of did one of these and walked away. And so yeah, door number 6, I'm cracking her open to see what's in there.
Yeah,
I'm
very
open. There we go. Wow.
I'm very interested to see what everybody thinks about number 6. I know I have some opinions on it. I think Jeff might have some opinions on it too.
I'm excited about this, and possibly for not the right reasons. But let's see. Marty, I muted you, by the way, just so that we could not have the background noise, but you can unmute at will. All right, Middleton Very Rare Irish whiskey. I think this came about because we were thinking like, oh, we don't want the Uber calendar to be just Scotch. So how do we add in, and like what premium products? And Evan, I don't remember if this was you or Kurt, but I think one of you guys maybe suggested this one. And I think it's still, regardless of how we find it to be, an interesting addition to the lineup, because like having a premium Irish whiskey in the calendar is absolutely cool. And something.
Well, I said in the blog post, in my blog post, like this is probably one of the most highly regarded no age statement whiskeys out there. There's never an age statement for the Middletons that I'm aware of. Yet it always has a relatively prestige price point. It's definitely been eclipsed by other whiskeys, but it started high and it's remained high throughout its inception.
What do we know about it? Like, you're gonna have to fill us in, because like I know back in the day it came in a wooden box and it was called Middleton Very Rare, and some people bought it and it was like $2.30 for the longest time. Price didn't.
Yeah, it's not a whiskey that I have a huge amount of experience with personally. I definitely know the bottles to see them. The wooden box has gotten a little bit bigger over the last couple of years as they've gone to a slightly stubbier and wider bottle. Typically, from what I could find out, it is a vintage release where well, not a vintage release, but an annual release, I should say. And they typically age most of it in ex-bourbon barrels. So it's not going the Redbreast direction, which is made by the same company, where they go into more sherry.
But my understanding of it is that it was always a high proportion of pot still whiskey.
Yeah.
Was what I thought with the Middleton. Yeah. And I mean, for those who don't know, Irish Distillers, biggest producer of Irish whiskey in the world. For the longest time, they owned the entire industry for a while until Cooley started. But what a lot of people didn't know about Irish versus Scotch is that for the longest time, Ireland had just 3 distilleries, and almost every Irish whiskey brand came from Middleton. And Middleton was the amalgamation of what Powers, Paddy, and Jameson in, I think, 1973, along with the Middleton Distillery. And then they formed what was then called New Middleton Distillery. And then that was the genesis. And for the longest time, if you had Tullamore Dew, Redbreast, Powers, Paddy, Jameson, Middleton, almost any Irish whiskey you can think of, it all came from this one plant.
Yeah, and everything but Bushmills. Yeah.
Everything but Bushmills, and then eventually Cooley, which was sort of the turning point. And I mean, we've talked about it in the store tastings, like Redbreast is a staff favorite, like as a style of Irish whiskey, the 12 cask strength, the 21, like we love those whiskeys. We've not really poured Middleton very often for the longest while.
Yeah.
Frankly, ever. Probably because, well, you know, putting all our cards perhaps where they should be, we've not had the most straightforward of relationships with the parent company for quite some time. Like it started with them not ever coming into our store. And then there was a video involving a steamroller, which may or may not have bruised some egos. That was
definitely did a number on the glass. That's for sure.
It was a playful attempt to get their attention, and it did not succeed in the way we thought it would. But yeah, it's an Irish whiskey that we don't really talk about, or we often stock it. But what are our thoughts on this?
Yeah. So 40% alcohol is probably the biggest downside, in my opinion, to the Middleton very rare line.
I'm a little disappointed in the alcohol strength as well. So.
But, I mean, it's pleasant in the way I expect a presumably older blend of whiskeys to be pleasant. It's fine. I don't know that it's $400 fine. That might be the biggest knock I have on this, is that I just don't think it hits what they're asking for people to pay. It's creamy, there's a bit of fruit, a bit of spice, but it tastes diluted.
Yeah. It smells, and Jeff kind of alludes to this too. He says, like drinking a vanilla scented candle. There's definitely this waxy quality, but it's almost not even wax. It's like lip balm that I'm nosing on it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I get the like vanilla and some baked apple on those. So.
Yeah, there's a bit of orchard fruit coming through, but it is not very expressive, I guess is the best way to put it.
I mean, I've not had this in quite a while, so I'm not sure what my frame of reference is, but it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not exciting. So
yeah.
And let's be clear, we didn't put this into the calendar with any Machiavellian scheme to take the piss out of Irish Distillers or Middleton. You know, I think we put this in there because we wanted a cool Irish whiskey that maybe the average mortal would not normally purchase for themselves. But I have to say, I just don't think that the quality meets the price point.
Yeah. So the last Middleton I tried before this, we had when they were essentially blowing it out, it was the Middleton. It was one of the limited Middletons.
Oh, the Dare Ak Gilak, something like that. Yeah.
Which I remember tasting that and being like, like not expecting much and then being like, holy crap, this is delicious stuff. So I got to say, this is a pretty severe letdown for me.
Yeah. Well, and the redbreast whiskeys are excellent.
Yep.
Like the range is excellent. Green spots, yellow spots, all the ones I've had have been good. I think for me, like where we think about like what would be something like that should be in this kind of caliber, and it would be like either an old Bushmills or an old Teeling,
Mhm.
an old Cooley single malt, which sadly we just don't see many of those anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, a good starting point. I'm hoping that we've got 4 things that are going to put this in its place. So let's crack open door number 7 and see what's behind door number 7. Boutique Capardonic. Oh, interesting. Now, I haven't looked to see if this is the one, because there was one that might appear sold out on our site that we're actually getting more of, and that might be this one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually, I just switched the SKUs because it seems to have 2 different SKUs.
Yeah, it did. I'd asked Connie to move the inventory over because one had a description and the other didn't. But there were 2 SKUs originally, because we had 2 different Capardonics from Boutique that were different batches. This is batch 6, bottled at 47.8%. Anyway, Evan, closed distillery. Always fun to put a closed distillery in the calendar. Not something.
Yeah, this was one of the more fun write-ups that I've done so far on the Uber calendar side, and they've all been pretty enjoyable. But talking about how and reading the story about how this was essentially Glen Grant number 2, built right across the road, and it never seemed to kind of get any sort of grip or traction on its own, and always was given short shrift because it didn't end up being GlenDronach or Glen Grant number 2 like they hoped it would be stylistically. What was really, really interesting. So it always came, or it seems to have come off as sort of like this second child that was never really wanted because it never lived up to the expectations of the first one.
Now, I'm going to share my screen for the moment, because we've got, and admittedly, the photos are slightly different, but we have 2 different batches of Boutique Capardonic, that one's 23, one's 22. I'm just trying to get this thing to let me share my screen. Why is it not cooperating? Uno momento, as they say. Here we go. So ignore this one on the right. We do have a different Capardonic in from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, which is also lovely. The Boutique labels are similar. One's older than the other. They always do make some changes. What they should both have, though, is isn't there there's a pipe, actually, you can see it right there.
Yeah,
that
going
runs
to Glen Grant
across
number
the
1
street in Rothus, because Capardonic was located across the street from Glen Grant. And the spirit from the distillery actually flowed towards Glen Grant through a copper pipe above the road, which only in small town Scotland would something like that happen without someone finding an ingenious way to steal the spirit as it's flowing over the road. The fact that no one thought about that is sort of surprising to me. And then Evan, did you touch on at all what happened to the distillery afterwards?
And no, I don't think I did. I'll have to take a look at the blog post.
It's actually now it's a site for Forsyths, the company that makes stills.
Oh yes, that's right.
And
So
distilling.
Forsyths purchased it and then sold off the stills to a few different distilleries as well. Because I think one of them's in a distillery in Belgium, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, distilling. Oh, is that the White Owl Distillery or whatever?
Yeah, something like that. And yeah, it's yet another distillery that's along the way touched Pernod Ricard's hands and been shuffled loose of its mortal coil, essentially.
Yeah. Well, as happens. So we could talk briefly about the closed distillery angle on this for a moment. Capardonic, I think, like Imperial, was one of those distilleries that, even though it had shut, people just weren't really clamoring for it. I think it probably has a bit more of a reputation now than it did, say, a decade ago. But the funny thing is, and maybe it's just our shop and maybe it's just our little corner of the whiskey verse, but it seems to me that like Imperial has more of a reputation than Capardonic does. Like
Yeah,
Capardonic
agreed.
doesn't really, I guess maybe it's not exciting. It just doesn't have any mystique to it.
I gotta say, I really like this whiskey. Like, it's not like jumping out of the glass at you, nose and palate wise, but it's got these beautiful fruit cup notes and really nice peach notes to it as well.
Yeah.
Both the nose and palate have a cantaloupe note that, so far as I know, has not been recalled. I know that's a big thing right now, cantaloupe recalls. So, yeah, melon, citrus. It's soft. It's pretty. There's a pepperiness too on the finish.
Yeah.
Marty, what have you got there?
Yeah, well, on the nose, I did get like the white fruits, the apple, pear. And the palate, it's definitely it's got some interesting. It's not boring compared to the first one,
Yeah.
compared to the Middleton. It's got some nice tones. It's pretty smooth on the palate still. And
It doesn't hurt that the ABV is 47.8%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun whiskey, as the Evans tasting note says.
Yeah, definitely starting on the lighter side for this round. And these were at the time honestly, I don't think I tried any of these up until the Claxton's tasting we did a while back, but we'll get to that one next when Andrew cracks his window. But for this lineup of 5, it was shots in the dark. Yeah,
I don't know what's
you didn't hear that, Andrew. Yeah.
For if somebody is a Capardonic fan and happens to be in duty free in Europe, there are peated Capardonics still available in the duty free in Frankfurt, for example.
What were those running? Because I mean, I remember trying them and they were good.
Yeah, we had one recently at one of the Quake tastings, and I had bought that same bottle. What was it, about 20 years old or something? I think it was $200 and some. It had gone up a little bit when I saw them a couple of months ago. But just a warning, if you're like me and happen to fly back direct Frankfurt to Calgary, it's no longer Air Canada. It's now a Lufthansa subsidiary, Eurowings, and that flies out of Terminal C, which has a crappy duty-free shop. You want to go into Terminal B duty-free first before you actually go through customs.
Oh, Marty, you got to get on Team WestJet here. Air Canada doesn't love Calgary anymore.
Did it ever?
Duty free, to be totally honest with you, with few exceptions, is the worst place to buy whiskey. But that's just a humble. And I'm not just saying that because we sell whiskey, but like I go through there and get frustrated by the garbage that they're shilling on people. Now, something like a Capardonic bottling, like that's not a bad price for a 20-year-old distillery bottling from a distillery that's closed. But I remember trying them at Whiskey Live London last year and just be like, they were fine. They just weren't exciting. But Pernod Ricard, this is lovely, as Evan said. Palate's great, it's pretty. Now, Jeff was asking, is that the SMWS Capardonic from a couple months ago? And yes, Jeff, it is. It is the same bottling. I'm pretty sure I tried that. That's a good bottling, isn't it? Was it?
It is. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit juicier than this one, even. From what I recall, it was really well put together.
Yeah. All right. Door number 8. From what I understand, there's a Claxton's behind it. So let's be somewhat surprised. I don't even remember what Claxton's is. It Glen Grant? Oh, it's Tobermory.
No, this was I think we tossed this in just to make Jeff angry when it comes down to it, because it gave us a second Tobermory already.
Oh my God. I did this at a private tasting the other night for a company, like a corporate group in Ontario. This is sort of an interesting, wacky whiskey. Granted, I also had COVID at the time, but wow. Like this is so dumpy, sherry on the nose.
Yep.
Oh man.
Yeah, this is full on like French onion soup notes for me right now.
This is dunnage, beef bouillon cubes, Christmas cake, like dusted in cocoa, like powder.
So the fun thing for me with this one is this is actually so same vintage 1995 as the SMWS Lecheg that we had, where we had a great debate over whether it was Lecheg or just Tobermory. This is described as Tobermory by Claxton's, and it's meatier than the supposed Lecheg that we had from the SMWS on day one.
And it's out of stock. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll put this up on the screen here. 26-year-old Tobermory. I was over in Scotland in October, and I actually paid a visit to Claxton's, which has a bond in an old estate in the south of Scotland, not far from the border with England. Interesting guys. This is a fascinating whiskey because I don't think this is a sherry season cask. I think this is an actual proper sherry maturation cask, and that's a big part of the profile on it. And these guys, they do try to find proper sherry casks, but yeah, this is an interesting one. I think the price on this, relatively speaking, was probably very good, and is probably why it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And we did have a we don't see the independent bottler anymore, but we did have a Wilson and Morgan Tobermory years ago that had a lot of these similar notes to it.
Like polished leather, Christmas cake, brandy.
So take a chamois cloth and clean off your car tires with it and get a little bit of that rubber tone.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and I think you got to polish your Corinthian leather seats too.
That's right.
That's the thing. Interesting side note, Corinthian leather is a reference to not Greece, but Corinth, Michigan. I love that fact.
Yeah.
Classy. This is it, like, you know what? There's even though this is older, there's traces of our Tobermory berries in this too. Like that nutty sherry profile.
I think our Tobermory is cleaner stylistically, like it doesn't have that meaty side to it.
Oh, I think it has a bit of that meaty side, but it's also a beast. It's like 65% alcohol. Imagine what that would do to Corinthian leather seats. Like 65% alcohol would just eat through that stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm getting like notes of bus vinyl on the palate. Just bringing me back to high school, I suppose.
Yep. Well, it was 1995, so.
Like chlorine, like, does anyone get like a chlorine note from it?
Yeah, it does have a bit of like tidal pool. Even.
I mean, maybe Tobermory / Lecheg, God. Or the reason I got all tongue twisted there was because I was going to go to Toberdag right off the bat. Maybe the challenge with Toberdag is just that everything from that distillery's got an amount of latex in it.
Yep.
It's just whether it's perceptible or not.
Yeah, this is where all the microplastics go. Is Tobermory Distillery.
I almost had an acetone-like nose at first. It was odd.
Acetone I can see.
When I first nosed it, this is Frederica said, and tasted it earlier, I got sulfur, but it has faded away. You know, Frederica, I'm not surprised you got that note, because sulfur, I think sulfur, sometimes people detect sulfur because of the style of sherry and sometimes not because of the sulfur. And it's because there's sherry notes associated with sulfur that can be there with or without the sulfur. And I personally don't think there's any sulfur here. I think this is like that Kensington cask, and this is the reason I brought it up. It's just that really dry, nutty, leathery, not sweet sherry coming through.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Superstore brand, specifically President's Choice all dressed potato chips. where you get the salt and vinegar and the barbecue at the same time.
I'm getting big time eat more now on the palate. So molasses, nuts, I don't know, maybe a trace of the plastic wrapper.
Okay.
I like it more than Lecheg.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I will say, for me personally, and I'm curious to see what other people think. If you can remember back to Dram 1 on our first round, which was the SMWS 42, the Lecheg, that was so much cleaner. And I like both styles, but that one was my preference because it was so out of left field for the distillery.
Jeff, I love that fact about our Corinthian leather, and I love how they dragged Spain into this with the 1975 Cordoba. Man,
Well, they also had Ricardo Montalban do the commercial, which was that was either just before or when he was fresh off of Wrath of Khan, if I remember correctly, from Star Trek.
Was he Khan? Was that Ricardo Montalban?
Yeah.
Yep. In the original Star Trek and in the movie.
Nice. I just saw that movie like about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was just on TV one day. It's not aged well as a movie. But maybe that's not surprising. And I'm not saying that in a woke sense, just more in a general movies enjoyment sense. It just doesn't look great. Shall we see what's behind door number 9?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I don't know if I'm disappointed or like that Tobermory I poured it in a private tasting last week, and it was kind of a highlight. Granted, my palate may not have been in its best shape at that point in time. But, and it was a crowd pleaser too. I had a bunch of finance guys out in Toronto and they were all digging it. Glenn Farkless.
This should make up for it.
1990. Sorry, what's that, Evan?
I said this should make up for it.
Oh man. I already had 3 emails about this whiskey this week that people were so stoked to see this in the whiskey calendar. Glenn Farkless 1990 Family Cask S22. Yeah, and look at the color. I'm just looking at the glass. Look at the color.
Yeah. That's really nice.
Now,
I'm curious to see if anybody gets sulfur off this one. I don't at all. This is super clean in my opinion, but I don't pick it up as much as other people do.
Let's see. I'm going to pull up the see if I can pull up the whiskey in question on our site. While we're on the subject of this, because and it does say low stock, so there's not much of this to be had. I'm going to also quickly, we did this in the last session and didn't want to like spend too much time bombarding you with future tasting events, but one of the ones that may be relevant to this one coming up is that we've got Deborah Stewart from Glenn Farkless doing a virtual family cask tasting with us in January. We're not using the 1990, we're doing the 91, 92, 93, and 94. But anyway, I thought that was somewhat related, so I should share it. And here is the 1994 US22 summer 2022 release. It is from a sherry butt, bottled at 51.3% and presumed to be 31 or 32 years of age. We can't be sure because we don't know when it was distilled. But thoughts on this one? Jeff has a complaint. There's so many family casks listed on the site. It's too tempting. Sorry, Jeff. We are bad people.
Yeah, if you can easily fix that problem by just buying them all,
and
then it won't be tempting anymore.
This is most definitely not sulfured.
No, I don't get any sulfur.
No, this is gorgeous.
A bit of like burnt caramel, something like that. And
this is like our 92 cask. This is like a gooey, tropical, Christmas cakey, classic old school sherried whiskey.
And classic old school Glen Farkless too for family casks. Like this is typically what people are looking for when they're looking at family casks, in my opinion. It is like going into balsamic reduction notes for me.
Boy.
Where you get that combination of like super unctuous and sour, but sweet at the same time.
It has me craving my mom's mincemeat pie, which she makes with mint, like real meat. So she actually puts
Yep.
meat in her mincemeat pie.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is
It's killer.
classic Glenfarclas. That is what people hunt for as far as family casts go, and just awesome.
Mhm.
Toberdag, Jeff. Toberdag makes up for the Toberdag.
Yeah.
Where the line is blurred between Tobermory and Licheg, and you're not really sure if you have one or the other or both. Yeah. Wow.
Really nice drying tannins on that too. So
Yeah.
it's
They're
Yeah.
dry,
Other than
it
but they're
just
not
lasts
cloying.
sticking around in the palate.
Yeah.
But they're not cloying. Like they're not overpowering.
No.
other than just a little bit of lack of weight on the palate, there's so much of this that reminds me of like 1960s and 1950s GNM bottlings that I've tried, where it's just like it's hyper sherry, but hyper sherry in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, it has the mouthfeel and the presence of like an old Strathisla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't need that, but part of me wants one, which I know is rational. Got more whiskey than I'll ever drink, but that's a gorgeous bottling.
Yeah.
I don't think we put that in the lineup for any ulterior motives other than that we had
No.
a handful of them. They're like, oh, we should put this in. It'd be fun to put in a 1990 family cask. And that does not disappoint.
I was
I
thinking
think
maybe for Jeff's sake, since he expects me to be shilling my Licheg calendar in the back alley now at some time, but maybe we should do a family cast calendar.
that I mean, never say never.
Yeah.
Let's
It would be more than the Uber calendar, though.
Yeah, I mean but it would be something pretty spectacular. Before we go, don't give me ideas that I might actually run with after. Like that's dangerous. Dangerous talk. Jeff, to answer your question, this would have come in, I believe, like early summer is when we received these. A year
Sounds
after
about right.
we requested them. I know the summer 2023 release that we just ordered is coming, I think, early in the new year. But yeah, these came about 5 months ago, I think, 4 or 5 months ago. Wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow. Love it.
Yeah.
Kevin, what's next? Am I gonna be like really excited? Or did we already peak? Did we peak too early?
No, I think this is a fun one.
Okay. All right. I'm wrecking the logo on the box. There's no one doing this. Oh, Hypernova. Ooh.
Yeah.
It's not a
This was
supernova. Hypernova.
this was another fun blog post to write up because I sure do love poking fun at at Ardbeg with their special releases. But
speaking of which, there's another one coming on Wednesday, so watch your
I know.
Another one.
Yeah.
Well, it has been a week.
Let's just say it's called, well, I guess it's called Anthology. Anthology is coming out on Wednesday, so it's a
I love
13.
Ardbeg, but I'm just concerned if they've already jumped the shark with all these special releases.
There do seem to be more special releases each year than their core range now.
Yeah.
Marty, I love that you just used the expression "jumped the shark." That
Yeah.
I think that's you win the tasting, Marty. You win the tasting tonight. Oh God.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
think Jeff said
someone's
it right.
It's like someone's making mezcal in a hot tub.
Oh yeah, mezcal. Yeah.
Yeah, this goes in that mezcal-y sort of phenolic note in a similar fashion to
Definitely.
heavy vapors, in my opinion.
Oh God. And I think this is one of those mezcals where they put the raw chicken in there too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're making raw
this,
chicken mezcal in the hot tub.
According to Ardbeg, I think this is around 170 ppm for the malt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the peatiest Ardbeg ever because of that. But I still think we should start going Glen Aleki's route and measuring the peat at the point of bottling, essentially.
Yeah,
I,
might be nice to see how those numbers compare.
I like the palate on this. Like,
Palate's really good.
it's kind of ethereal smoke, mezcal. It's minty. Like there's a mintiness to the smoke.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want like big smoke, like a whiskey that's dominated by smoke, this is great. I mean, it's kind of what you want. We did we had the the Bruichladdich tasting 2 weeks ago, which is during the week where I had to do 4 tastings, including Evan's SMWS tastings, which is probably when I got COVID. So it's your fault, Evan, is what I'm trying to say here.
You're welcome.
Technically your children's fault because they got sick and got you sick, which meant I had to do your tasting, which is how I got COVID. But if we rewind it all back, we had a Bruichladdich tasting that week. We did the 3 Octomore 14s, and like they were fine, but I actually like this better than I like those Octomore.
Yeah, I agree.
I haven't tried the latest Octomores. It's to take the jump the shark from Marty. There's a series that has jumped the shark with their pricing, in my opinion. But
and you know who's going to reverse jump the shark is Glen Aleky with their
really?
Michael Taurus, which are coming out next year. Uber heavily peated Glen Alekys.
Can't wait to try that.
Not superhuman pricing. So Billy Walker poking a stick in the man's eye, I think. We'll see. We'll see what happens. They're probably still going to be like limited and hard to actually buy. But the Hypernova, I don't know if I've tried that before, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, it was the first time for me. I think it's a pretty nice combination of heavy vapors meets some of the old Supernova releases where it's a little bit more phenolic, but nicely put together.
Pashuga, Jeff has weighed in here with a dissertation on mezcal. Yeah. I love it.
To
That would be a nice time to try the chicken.
To me, this is, quite a bit cleaner on the palate than the heavy vapors. So just find that one a bit meaty and not too Ardbeggy, I guess.
Well,
that heavy vapors was Ardbeg's trying so hard to be Lacheg, in my opinion.
Well, maybe Ardbeg, even though it's super heavily peated, needs that clean smoke. That spirit purifier is actually doing something that makes Ardbeg elegant at the same time as being heavily peated. It reminds me of some of those earlier bottlings of Supernova, but just more concentrated. Yeah, it's good. It's still suffering in the wake of Glenfarclas 1990, but you know what?
Wouldn't? Yeah.
And there's a reason this ended up in the Uber calendar, because there was 2 bottles in my office that I didn't know what I was going to do with. And we did need some peat in the Uber calendar, and that's why it made it in there this year. Again, no clever planning, Machiavellian scheme. It was, we've got these lying around. We should put them in the calendar. So plus Evan and I and Marty get to try it. So
that's right.
Without having to open my own bottle at home, yeah.
That's right.
All right. Are we ready for the speed rounds? Is that where we're at here?
Sure.
I'm nosing the Middleton again, and I think the nose has gotten a little bit better.
It's like opening plastic toys from the early 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, this does smell like the 40-year-old Lego that has survived my brother and I to be played with by my kids now.
Maybe it just absorbed some of the aromas from the neighboring glasses.
That's right.
Anyone get a little Velveeta?
Oh, that's a good call. Yeah, plastic cheese. Fake plastic cheese, as Radiohead like to say. Or was that trees?
The cheese-like substance.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not exciting.
Yep. Palate has gotten better
Yeah.
again for me, and even after maybe it was the shock of the hypernova that opened up my taste buds a bit more, but it's still,
Yeah.
It makes me wonder what it could be at a higher strength. That's for sure.
Yeah, 46 would be nice to see out this.
Well, and how much grain whiskey versus how much pot still is what I
There,
wonder.
palate wise, especially, there seems to be a tremendous amount of grain in there.
So yeah, and for those who don't know, grain whiskey is like the body in blends. In Scotland, you would use grain whiskey with malt whiskey. Middleton doesn't make malt whiskey, although they can buy it from other distilleries like Bushmills to use in their blends. But ultimately, their blends are heavily dominated by pot still and blended whiskey and grain whiskey rather. And it's good. It's just not exciting, and it doesn't, to me, meet the price point. So
No, agreed. Back to the Capradonic.
Capradonic, like some sarsaparilla on the nose.
Mm-hmm. The nose has faded a bit more on this one for me versus the Middleton.
It's very fruity now. Like it's basically just like lots of fruits, lots of berries, bit of melon and citrus. Yeah, easy drinking. I think we bought these Capradonics from Boutique at a time when like it seemed the well of Capradonic had dried up.
Yeah.
And then we just started seeing it from Signatory and the Society and other people. And these are in 500 ml bottles. And let's be honest, the labels on these are perhaps not that Boutique whiskey company's best work. They're just a little boring. It's a
It
nice.
only has like one in joke on it. It needs more in jokes.
It's a night scene in possibly one of Scotland's most boring little towns that everybody just drives through. I think that's the challenge. So, anyway, it's good. Still good. What about the Tobermory or Toberdag? How is the Toberdag holding up?
Yeah. The Capradonic logo from Boutique should be like this little kid next to this like super tall big brother whose head's out of the shot, and then the parents talking to him from out of frame saying, "Why couldn't you be more like your brother?"
That might work. Or a dinosaur, per Jeff's suggestion.
Yeah, that's right. Dinosaurs always work.
Or like dinosaurs, maybe a mosasaur this time, something a little different.
Yeah. This is full on itchy band packet right now for me on the nose.
It's definitely settled down a fair bit. Like it's not as sort of wacky as it was first time around. Still very nutty, sherry, tart, spicy,
Salty.
rubbery, and salty. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sold out. So, not to say that doesn't mean we shouldn't dwell on it longer, but to be honest, I just want to get back to the Glenfarclas.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, to put a last to mind, I was very sparing when I did the tasting notes, but I'm enjoying the rest of this now.
This one just smells and tastes like more.
Yeah. It's like he drizzled a reduced balsamic vinegar over tiramisu right now for me.
Tiramisu is such a good note for this. Man.
Yeah.
That's got shades of the 1972 Glendronach that we did for the shop, Marty?
Yeah.
It's not as tropical, but it's got that like nice, rich, dark, old school. This is a funny whiskey because it was probably right to bottle it when they did. Like, I'm not sure this whiskey left in the cask much longer would have gotten necessarily better because it just would have gotten darker, more sherry. And I think you're right. I think it would have gone to bitter territories. So this is not a whiskey that you could have left and hoped that it would just get tropical. But man, it's great. This is one of the best family cask bottlings I've had in the last few years. So
Yeah, really
yeah,
nice.
it's almost like they had set aside this to be like in the 4-year-old, and then they were like, "Ooh, it's not going to make it."
probably not. I mean, well, if you look at the 40-year, we did that tasting with Deborah. When was that? That was last week, wasn't it? Or 2 weeks ago? Last week, maybe.
It's Friday. Yep.
The 40-year is so delicate. I mean, it's sherried. It's more sherried than the 30 and the 35, but it's still very, very delicate. And even if you wanted to leave that to be bottled, and it would be, I think it would skew the 40-year in a different flavor profile. So delicious. Okay.
Back to Hypernova.
Back to Hypernova. Just by pure fluke, I put this in the blender's glass, and man, I'm getting like potting soil.
Yeah, it's got some earthy notes for sure.
Like, when you like in the spring when you're told it's the day to do the garden, so you do as you're told, and you open up those pots and there's like detritus from past years in it. Like, it reminds me of that sort of old, earthy, rotting vegetal notes.
Yeah, it is very turfy stylistically on the nose. It's got this great sort of smoky apple cinnamon oatmeal note for me as well, though.
I didn't think so. When we put this in the calendar, this is what I haven't, and we had 2 of them in this round. I think there are 3 non-age statement whiskeys in the entire calendar. There might only be 2. Without revealing what might be to come, there's a whiskey that on paper may seem young, but it's probably not really all that young. But I remember thinking about the list, and like, we were promoting it as X years and all this stuff. And I remember looking at the Hypernova and I was like, is that like, should it actually be in the calendar this year? Like, is that too low? And like, it's probably young. Like, it's definitely under 10 years. It's probably actually under 7 or 8 years. I don't know how, I have no idea how this is, but it's punching above its weight age-wise.
No, I totally agree. And this is what I loved about, and I haven't tried the recent ones, but from Octomores around the 6s, like the 6 series is probably where I have the most experience with Octomore, where it's a bottle where you look at the statistics and it's like, there's no way this should be drinkable. And then you taste it and it's just like, oh, there's a lot of peat in there, but there's still more going on than just that. And that's what makes bottlings like this and the Octomore so good, in my opinion.
It's great. All right, so what have we got, Evan? Are we doing the poll, or
yeah, we might as well.
We've got a small sample audience here, so I think rather than the poll,
sure,
let's make it interesting / slightly cruel. Let's get everybody to give us their 5 to 1, like least favorite to favorite whiskey.
Ooh, that's a good one.
We've never done that before, but I mean, we've got a small group here, so that should be doable. I think I know what mine are without even having.
You want to start us off, Andrew?
Sure. I'm gonna go favorite to least favorite. There's no doubt about it that Glenfarclas is, I mean, that is what a good old single cask should be. So it's hands down my favorite.
I was gonna say, I think we can pick everybody's 5 and everybody's 1 in this pretty easily, but we'll see.
Possibly. The Hypernova is my number 2, which is a bit of a surprise to me. I would have thought Yeah, I'll be honest. I was worried that it was not going to live up to people's expectations or my expectations for the calendar, and I think it shocked me by exceeding them. 3 is easy. It's the Capradonic. It's great. It's not mind blowing, but it's great. It's good. The Tobermory, I think, suffers a little bit from weirdness, the Toberdag effect, but it's still good. It's still fun. I think it's still a decent bottling. And then the Middleton just, yeah, lackluster. It does not. It's definitely the weakest whiskey in the calendar thus far. Of the first 10 whiskeys, I think it's the weakest whiskey in the calendar. So those are my
Marty?
thoughts.
Well, I'd just be repeating what the order for Andrew. So, but I think like the Glenfarclas, I think just it's a head above everybody else on this one. And like then the Ardbeg, Capradonic, I like the juiciness of it, the fruit tones. And Tobermory, disappointed a bit. I mean the Middleton, like no flaws. It's just kind of boring, I guess. It's nice but boring.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be coloring outside the lines from you guys too much. My number 5 is easily the Glenfarclas. It's calendars like this to me, especially on the Uber side of things, are about trying stuff you don't get to try on a daily basis, and that's just a spot on family cask. Like there's nothing out of place for it. It's exactly what you're looking for when you purchase a family cask. Andrew?
Remember when the 1990s were like $500? And it wasn't that long ago. It was like 2
years.
years ago. The 1990s were like $500. It's 3 times the price now.
Yeah, I am gonna pick the Tilburg for my second, just because I gotta be weird and go that route. Hypernova pleasantly surprised me. That's my number 3. I thought it showed really well. I wasn't not expecting anything from Ardbeg. Ardbeg, as much as I like to rail against them, tends to do a pretty quality product, but their special releases just kind of let me down versus their core range a lot of the times, and this one didn't. Capradonic is pretty close to that one. I really enjoyed that Capradonic as well. The only one that I did find disappointing in this lineup is my number 5, and that's the Middleton.
Mm-hmm. Is there a chance we're all being too hard on the Middleton?
Well, so I think the trouble with doing it in any sort of tasting is that you're going to put it up against something else. If it's taken in a vacuum, I think it would show a lot better.
So I'm assuming Peter's yes was that yes, we're being too hard on it, as opposed to but it looked like he was commenting on a different feed, and Jeff says no. I mean, it's drinkable, but I don't think for like the right reasons. Like it could have been a lot better. I just feel like they've cut corners on it. Like there's less probably pot still in there, probably because they need their mature pot still for Redbreast 7 and stuff like that we don't even get to see. So it's good. It's just not great. And that Claxton's Toberdag, it's weird, but I think it's still interesting, and the price point on it is reasonable for the age and the style.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could talk about the price point of the Hypernova, but the problem is those things are notoriously limited in availability, and whenever we talk about those Ardbeg things and say, oh, maybe it's overpriced, and then they for the most part they sell out. So
no, the reason Ardbeg has so many special releases is because it's a license to print money. Mm-hmm. They have the biggest cult following of any distillery right now, and they do great whiskey at the end of the day too.
Yeah. Except for maybe Springbank.
Yeah.
And well, I don't know that Pappy Van Winkle has a cult following so much as it has well, it's more of a like, how do I make money from it following?
Yes.
which has definitely unfortunately blended into the Springbank realm as well, but such is the way of things. Interesting. Now, before we wrap, guys, any thoughts? Anything you want to share? Does anyone have any questions? We'll ask that. So you have a few minutes if you want to bang out some questions. And I don't think we heard from Peter. Peter thought we were being too hard. Peter, do you want to share with us your favorites? Because we've heard from, and we haven't heard from Nick. We've got possibly two Nicks there. If you guys want to, if you don't, that's totally fine. There's no need to. But if you're interested, Evan, anything we should share before we wrap?
Well, not to continue rating on Middleton, but this would be a great whiskey if you could completely separate the price from it. I think it's still a solid whiskey. It's where pricing becomes a factor where it really falls apart for me.
Yeah. Peter, I love that your choices are different. I love that you love the Middleton. Good on you. I love that you put Glenfarclas the number 3. It shows that people have different tastes, and yeah, if everyone's tastes were the same, it would be a boring world. So I appreciate you sharing those. I'm glad they're different from the norm in here. Not big on sherry. You know what? The funny thing is, like, I'm not big on sherry these days either. But for someone who knows what sherried whiskeys are these days, like, that's why I think that Glenfarclas stood out so much, is because we see a lot of very new school, boring sherried whiskeys now, and that Glenfarclas is very different. But if you've done any of our store tastings that we do on the internet or on Zoom, I especially love like old refill, predominantly American oak whiskeys. Like, I love 20 to 30 something, especially like tired old cask matured whiskeys, because they get really tropical and fruity and elegant. I think that's what I was hoping for in the Middleton. To Evan's comment, like, I can only imagine how good something like that might have been with a slightly more polished blend and at a higher ABV. But
yeah, well, it's a really interesting contrast, and I apologize for those of you that got the Uber calendar that weren't in on our first tasting because we didn't send you the link. But it's a tremendous contrast to how well we took the Compass Box Orchard House, which is light and fruity, has a little bit of peat, but there's not a whole lot different stylistically beyond the grain being added on this one.
Ooh, that would be, you know what, that could be a fun concept for a tasting in the new year. Like, let's put Middleton Very Rare in a blind tasting against Compass Box Orchard House. And like, we've got to have a handful of these pairings like that we could do, where it's like, you think this is great, but so. And if to Evan's, like, if you weren't doing the tasting we did before the regular calendar, we had the Compass Box Orchard House, which is $75 and is a gorgeous whiskey for the price. Something to look forward to. Anyway, where are we at here? I think that's it, unless anyone's got anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed the tasting tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We will be doing this again in 5 days on Friday, which I know is a Friday night, but we do this in bunches of 5. Evan and I will be live, maybe Marty, at 30 Mountain on Friday. Until then, thanks for taking part in the tasting. Thanks for buying one of the whiskey calendars. I hope you're enjoying it. We'll chat again in 5 days.
Thanks, guys.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.